Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good very late evening to some of you I've seen on the call today. Thank you for joining us. It's our second one today. For some of you, it's our second one in 2 days of the Viva Engage Training and Adoption Masterclass. I always feel we better get started before the music goes on repeat more than twice. Otherwise, it's a bit like being on hold, I think, for a call center. Before we get started, though, a couple of announcements. The first of these is we have a brand new modern communications microsite. This is all about how to help corporate communicators drive AI business transformation. We know many of you are being asked to provide a significant role in driving excuse me, I'll start again. AI transformation across your business. And we have resources and guides, expertise from some of Microsoft's own communicators, and more. So if you follow the link, you'll be able to join and see what's in the new microsite. Secondly, just a reminder as we're getting closer to it, in May is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference, and part of that is our communications track. So you can learn everything about Microsoft, so Engage, Amplify, Connections, using Teams, AI, and analytics for all your communications needs, along with all the other Microsoft goodness that goes on at the conference. We still have a sign up code where you can save $150, and the link is in the slide as well. But heading to the masterclass. This is where we're halfway through. I'd love to see a reaction or two for those of you who have come to one or more of our first three masterclasses. I see some familiar names in the chat already. Excellent. Lots of reactions. We've had a great series so far on admin, on community management, and corp comms as well. And today we're going to focus on the issue of training and adoption, which is something that we all have to do, not just when we first launch Engage, but also ongoing as well. And how can we help deliver that as well? As an agenda, we thought this could include information from so many areas. That how could we make something that is both useful to you, for you to learn, but also that you can take, because we're going to share the slides and recording, that you can take and use with your employees and leaders and customers, and clients as well. We're actually build upon kind of three blocks in this masterclass. We're going to start with some fundamentals. How does the home feed work, for example? How do notifications work? And then we're going to move what we call beyond the basics. So kind of the next level. We're going to go to the eternal which tool when question that we know many of you get asked and ask us in turn. I'm glad I see some smiling faces there. And then a launch plan as well. And finally, we're going to build upon all of those with what we call engage like a pro. So how do you talk about moderating? How do you get another question everyone always talks about? How do you get leaders on Engage, and other things? Just a reminder, most of the things that we're going to share with you today are available with your Microsoft 365 version of Viva Engage, so your E5s, your E3s, your F licenses. But look out for the Viva icon. We will put that on screens as much as possible, or we will explain that we're talking about a capability that does require the additional licenses for Viva Suite Communications and Communities, which we're going to abbreviate to CNC, or Viva Suite as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You'll see that Alison has kindly put in the chat here. Please ask your questions in the Q&A at the top. That helps us to track them. And we already have a crack team of Viva Engage experts ready to answer your questions as well. Also, if you would like, a few people did this when we delivered this earlier today. If you find something that you find surprising, or something that was a big aha moment, or you learned something that you'd just like to share, if you're willing to take a screenshot, everything we're showing today, you can take screenshots of, although we will share the slides afterwards and the recording. Please take a screenshot, share it on LinkedIn with the hashtag Viva Engage, and we're going to look through all the posts that were made this week, and one lucky winner will get a one-to-one Engage health check with our product team. And we know that training and adoption for Viva Engage is, something where we have some excellent partners globally. One of the reasons that we have so many customers who have great engaged networks is because they utilize the services of some of our partners, whether it's Silicon Reef in the UK, WM Reply in UK, the Europe and North America, Change Champions in Canada, Designing Collaboration, and Swoop Analytics for those of you who are in Australia today might seem familiar. And we actually reached out and asked if they would be willing to provide some content for this session. And you will see as we bring them up over time that we've kept their content in the style of their slides with their branding. So you can see just a little taster of some of the services that they offer, how they work with customers, and see if they might be a good fit for helping you as well. Now, we're all here for Viva Engage. We know it's the tool to connect people across the organization, whether it's leaders, whether it's with your coworkers, whether it's news and direct communication, whether it's knowledge in communities and marking experts and verified answers and all the exciting things that have come out recently for communities. We want to activate employees. We want to help people feel like they belong to something more, so employees can contribute their energies in this big open platform. We want to empower leaders and, of course, the communicators that do so much work behind those leaders to reach at scale across your organization, but not just one way. We want them to be able to engage and listen in that two-way conversation that Engage enables. Of course, we want to help you build effective communities. And for those of you who joined us, we had a whole masterclass on community management. And finally, we want to help people find the answers to those questions they had, to connect with experts and to bring that knowledge out into the open in your organization and make it much more accessible. Of course, while all the time accessible across the Microsoft 365 suite, which is something that we'll talk about in our sections. Now, just before we get started, I always want to call out that Engage adoption and training is both a mix of art and science. For every, analytics and data-driven approach you can choose, every company is also different, every organization, whether it's your comfort with openness and sharing, whether it's your leaders are familiar with two-way communication. And over the course of all of our experience working with customers from the Viva Engage team, we know that every industry, geography, even departments have different requirements or even interpretations of how you should use Engage. So we're going to show you a lot of things that are available that will make sense and will be applicable to every scenario, but there's no one right way to be successful. Your culture is your culture, and we hope that what we have done is pulled together a great set of content and advice that you can adapt and fit to your organization rather than following a single cookie cutter approach. So we hope you enjoy, and as the note said, yes, the slides and the recording will be available afterwards on our Viva Engage blog site. So now we're going to start. Viva Engage fundamentals. What are the basic building blocks of Viva Engage? What are those things that we get asked from customers frequently? And how can we arm you with that information so when your employees ask you, you have all the details for them? So I'm going to hand off to Spencer, who's going to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, James. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're getting into the Engage fundamentals. And the first place we're going to start is the home feed. The home feed, I'm sure, is something that we can all picture, especially if we've seen the product before. But let's do a quick refresher. When we say the home feed, you see right here, our kind of aphorism today is to say it's the front door of Engage. When we look at the home feed, we're talking about the area in the middle of the main experience there that has all the conversations that line up. So in this example, you can see a post from Lawrence Gilbertson. It's marked as an announcement. And subsequent from that, if I were to scroll, I would see other conversations from around my organization across Engage. And then kind of surrounding the home feed, you have at the top a place to create new posts in our publisher. On the left side, you see some of the navigational elements to get to other communities. James will touch on that soon. And then on the right side, you can see the usage policy, links to events, links to active campaigns, and all the other information that users may need to find their way. The great thing about the home feed to consider, if you're going to use this metaphor maybe as the front door, is to say, okay, it's what people are going to see when they're in the product, when they hit the experience, but also it's really important to understand how it works, given it's such an important place in the product. So as we look at what the home feed does or how it works, I think the first thing to remember is that everyone's feed is personalized. Everyone's view is unique based on a range of factors because we rank the content that shows in that experience. And in the home feed, then, depending on the communities you're a member of, the people you're close to, the likelihood of engaging with specific kinds of content, and the types of controls or options that administrators and corporate communicators have used to put content in the feed, including tools like announcements and featured conversations. All of these mix together to create that home feed experience that's so powerful for users. If you have other questions, at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a link to Viva Engage Explained, the feed. That's an excellent blog post written by several colleagues that covers how everything works at a detailed level. And it's a great tool to share with people on your team, users directly, anyone that has a question as to how this works. But now that we've kind of talked a little bit about how things work, let's also consider why it is so powerful. So if we look at this diagram here on the right-hand side, really the reason why the home feed is so powerful is because of that ability to suggest content, communities, and people based on relevance. And we know that communicators can push things into the feed like announcements and featured conversations. And the home feed and its ranking algorithm or ranking engine takes all of that into account to create an experience that's personalized for the user. And this is a powerful thing because you're able to use the conversations that people want to see from their close connections, their leaders, communities they belong to, as well as recommend content that they may not see anywhere else. Whether it's a post from a community that is very, very likely to be the type of thing that somebody wants to see more of, we put it in the home feed. Storylines from colleagues all around the organization, all around the world, it's in the home feed. And also you can see at the bottom that purple bar that talks a little bit about trending content. Again, this is what satisfies that need for what's happening in Engage. All the org-wide communications investments folks are putting in does bubble up into this experience. So understanding and kind of respecting and looking to use and leverage the home feed in a way that accomplishes the goals that you're looking to achieve is absolutely critical to the success of Engage. And I highly recommend that folks take a good look at the experience, both for themselves, but also in the context of what are our users likely to experience in this important destination. So carrying on from this, my colleague Evelyn's going to jump on and talk a little bit about notifications.
Awesome. Thanks, Spencer. So just as Spencer was saying, right, this is a destination for people to come to. How do we get them into this destination? We're going to talk about a key tool here that you can use to not only keep employees informed, but once again, bring them back to this destination, bring them back to the conversations relevant to them. Now, there's a careful balance to strike here between making sure people feel informed, updated, and in the loop without overwhelming them. So we'll also be talking about how to use notifications more effectively. As you can see on the bottom here, it quickly states, on average, a single announcement made on Viva Engage reaches 56% of the intended audience within an hour. It's a very powerful tool. Now, what exactly are these notifications and how do they work? So to help users better organize the activity updates that are happening across Engage, we have two types of notifications. We have inbox notifications that you can see on the left there, and these are, you can see it as more time sensitive. These are items that likely require some sort of action on your behalf. These are your @ mentions. These are your replies. These are any private messages coming towards you. Perhaps someone @ mentioned you in a post to get your help answering a question, for example. On the flip side, we have the bell. Things that are organized into this bucket cover more passive actions. There's likely no immediate action needed. It's likely not time sensitive. It's more an update for your awareness. And you can see this as perhaps an example. My latest, I posted recently praising my awesome team about the most recent quarter we just wrapped up. Got lots of celebrate and love reactions from the team. It's not something I need to act on explicitly, but it's nice to know that those things are happening behind the scenes. On the flip side, here's one way in which a leader can leverage notifications. So we just talked about receiving those notifications. How might we go about using these notifications to send out messages to reach our intended audiences? So here's that one way coming from leaders. Maybe they want to send a time-sensitive critical message through an announcement. And we've seen our customers use this feature to communicate more time-sensitive updates, like I mentioned, perhaps ones reacting to news that may directly impact the organization, allowing it to come from the voice of the leader themselves on their storyline, and also allow for reactions from the team, two-way dialogue, whatnot. So not only can they specify exactly who they want to target, for example, perhaps it's an audience of only a certain region that the news affects, but they can also specify the notification channels that they'd like to target. Which, speaking of those notification channels, and we'll cover this in a bit more detail later, but no matter where you prefer to work, Engage will meet you where you are. A quick note here, when you're looking at the insights such as conversation analytics, views are counted by unique users. So even if you take a look at a notification or a post in email and also look at it from your Engage mobile app, it'll only count as one view. And to help users get the most out of notifications, as I briefly mentioned before, hinted at, information overload, especially in these days, it's a big challenge. And so to help make sure that your employees get the most out of notifications, we highly recommend you encourage customization of how these notifications are received. And currently, that can be done through the various channels that I showed on the previous slide. So Teams, for example, as a channel, email, for example, as a channel. We are looking toward to hopefully consolidating all of these in one space, but we're making our way there. This is actually our most recent revamp that we did on our email notifications panel. So if it looks a little different, if you haven't seen it before, that's because it's rolling out right now. So hopefully it'll land on your pages soon. But this is one of the ways in which you can use notifications effectively to minimize that information overload, customize it to each individual user as well. And at the end of the day, the product is constantly innovating to ensure that we help you strike this balance. For example, we most recently introduced a cascade effect to how users receive notifications. So the more active channels like Teams or mobile app push notifications, those will actually be receiving notifications instantly for community announcements, while others like email may be delayed, where if it's consumed in the active channel, we actually don't send that email notification at all. And this is all to help reduce any sort of redundant or duplicative notifications. We also have introduced something called essential announcements, allowing you to bypass any notification settings to make sure time-sensitive and critical messages are able to reach those users instantly. And most recently, we talked about on our public roadmap the new AI summaries that are coming to digest emails, which is the perfect transition back over to talking about email digests with Spencer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evelyn. The really powerful part about email digests is a lot of the understanding and detail comes from really putting together the last two sections into one place. If you think about everything we covered from the home feed, the ranking, the powerful engagement engine that is, and then the notification system, particularly in Outlook, you really get a foundation to see the benefits and understand how digests work in Engage. There are two digest emails that we send. The first one is a daily digest that's about catching up with all the content you might have missed, particularly from communities you've joined, your leaders, important announcements, messages from people whose storylines you follow, all goes in the daily. Then for the weekly digest, this is really about discovering new people, new content, new places in the network that can really be of interest to you and really build more connection. So they're very powerful together. And like the home feed, everybody's digests are personalized. And that's because digests are underpinned with much of the same approach that we take in the home feed to rank, to use relevance, to make sure that what's in there is really the best thing that we can show the user at this time. And Outlook is the best channel to do that for this work because we can draw on the benefit of meeting people where they work, where they're already used to getting these types of organizational messages, particularly in email. So if you think about all the users that are used to doing everything they're doing in Outlook every day, and all the communications that can go through Viva Engage, digests help bridge that gap between building the habits to using Engage as an org-wide comms tool and continuing to meet users where they are. This is a really important concept. We're going to keep coming back to this meeting users where they are element in subsequent sections of this masterclass. So let's talk a little bit about why interactive digest emails boost engagement. And on the right there, I have a screenshot of a Viva Engage or a weekly digest. And you can see here that really the first thing I think is the most exciting. Users can react and reply right from the email. So if you see that screenshot, that is an email, but the experience looks exactly like you would see on an Engage browser experience. I can leave a reaction. I can write a comment. I can really give people that signal alongside reading the content that everybody's looking for in this type of an experience. And that's because, as I said, our interactive emails mirror the Engage web experience. And depending on your Outlook client or your Outlook version, whether you're on Outlook Mobile, Outlook Classic or desktop, the new Outlook, which is rolling out right now, or Outlook on the web, you will see an experience like this and be able to give that signal back to your organization. Very powerful tool, particularly for corporate communicators and community admins, as this all boils into our analytics experiences. And finally, I don't want to miss that pro tip on the bottom of the slide. Because digests work in that way that they have the daily and they have the weekly, when you're planning your communications, you're looking at distribution and reach. Know that if users don't consume something right away, it might be in a digest within a day or two. And that might help you round out the delivery, that saturation, that distribution of communications that's so critical in a large organization. So this is a little bit about why email digests are super important. There's plenty of other materials in some of the other master classes around more details around digests, and we're happy to take some Q&A in the Q&A tab if you have any more questions. I'm going to turn it back over to James, who's going to talk a bit about navigating Engage.
Yeah, now we know some of the basics. That's the fundamentals because they're the building blocks, the home feed, notifications, email digests. And now we're going to talk about, well, how might we start to think about demoing to our users? What do we want to show them? What are the first things we should help them understand? And we kind of separate it into two parts. There's how do you navigate Engage? That's the wayfinding part. How do we go through Viva Engage? And secondly is how do they actually do something in Viva Engage as well? I'm going to jump in and demo directly here. So just bear with me while I share my screen. Just to let you know, while I start sharing my screen, is everything that I listed on that last slide is going to be available in the slide deck that we have ready for you at the once it's uploaded of this presentation. So don't worry if you don't fully follow along. You don't need to make notes. We will provide the sequence for you as well. So I'm going to do this very briefly. Could I just get a thumbs up from anyone just to say that my screen is sharing? A reaction, please. Perfect. Thank you. So as Spencer explained, we can talk about the home feed. Now you're all going to be experts and you can explain to your users how the home feed works. And you could be doing this on desktop. I'm in the Teams app here. You could explain it in mobile as well. And then we can start to draw down to show users what else that they can have as well. So maybe we want to look at all the communities we have available. Maybe when we want to see what our leaders have been up to in our leadership corner. For those of you who have Viva CNC or Suite licenses, we might want to see people's storylines. We want to see those personal takes that people have had. But really after that, what we'd like to do is really show them communities. So I would always start in the communities tab so they can see what communities they're a member of if you've automatically added them with dynamic groups. And it will recommend communities, of course, that you would like to join. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to join this community, my leadership connection, and then I'll jump into the community and share some of the things that you can do in Viva Engage. I'm going to favorite the community as well, a nice little tip so your users can go in and add their favorites and they can use the mobile experience to reorder those favorites. Now, when it comes, so that's the navigation. The second part is the engaging. And what's the best way to start people off posting? Well, actually, one of the first best ways is to, let me go to a different community, apologies. What is the best way to help someone get posting? I actually asked it as a question so we can use it later here. It's actually to get them to start slowly. Start by reacting to some posts, maybe replying if they feel comfortable, but maybe perform while you're doing your training. Get them to react to 2 or 3 posts, because if they do that, they're 54% more likely to then go make a post to people who haven't done that kind of first step of sort of getting used to the social engagement. Again, we're going to have slides available with these stats on for you. And for this one as well, how do I make a great post in Viva Engage? Just a few like tips or tricks. So, and go into make your first post to your storyline or in a community, and then importantly, write as you speak. Keep it relatively brief. You've got articles for long form content. Make it entertaining with media and GIFs and emojis. And if you add images or videos, it's not to say to add to every single one that you post, but you will see an increase in engagement from 1.5 to just over 2.5 more reactions and replies that you will see. Even when we talk later about sitting down with leaders, this is a great set of advice to give them. And then I just walk them through the different posts. So maybe we first talk about a discussion post. You can even take them off to one side to use Copilot to create a nice image to add to your discussion post. Maybe you want to add a poll, or you want to even engage with that poll. I'm going to change my vote because I voted earlier, but polls really engage people. It's a really nice informal way to just take the temperature, get a feel of the group of people that you're talking to. Maybe you want to praise someone, a really powerful way of building that inclusion and belonging in your organization by praising people for the hard work that they do and the contributions they make to your organization. And then for that long form content, maybe you want to help, especially if you're training communicators, help them get comfortable with articles. Articles do require to create a Viva CNC or Suite license, but they're lovely and they appear, as Spencer and Evelyn have said, in your notifications and across the other apps as well. So you can create a nice long form article to engage people. Almost think of them as, you can even think of them as ways to build out newsletters in your organization. And then, of course, you can go and ask a question. And I know this is one that I've got prepared earlier, but for those of you do again with the additional licensing, you get related questions, which means that when you start to type a question, you will automatically see what we call similar questions, and it will start to surface questions that have already been answered by your experts in communities and others with best answer, so that those people that you have providing the support in those communities don't have to answer the same question over and over again. But that's the kind of flow that we start off with, even when we're on calls with customers and sharing just how to get started with Engage. I'm just going to jump in and start sharing our deck again. And just a reminder, we have a number of slides, one per each of those components that I showed you. And you will be able to take those as soon as we get them uploaded. And if you just bear with me while I wait for PowerPoint Live to bring me up to the next section. Here we go. We're going to move on to our next section. Now, we call it Beyond the Basics. We were talking about the fundamental building blocks, but now we wanted to build upon those and talk about some of the ways that you can engage your employees, your communicators, your leaders, and others, and what it is, or what are some of the things you can explain to them, get them doing in order to create that engagement in your network. And what does a launch plan look like as well? But first of all, we are going to move on to, I'm sure you have been asked this question. I'd love to have a reaction if you've ever been asked or have asked yourself, well, Teams and Engage, well, which tool should we use when? I see a number of thumbs up going, we've all been asked it, right? But as Evelyn and Spencer were explaining, between notifications bringing people's attention to content and the email digest as almost a specific version of that, Engage is designed to meet your users where they are. They don't necessarily have to go to a tool called Engage to too many engages, but to experience Engage content. And so Engage content is surfaced where people work, whether they're using the Viva Engage apps. We have our web browser, we have our amazing iOS and Android apps, whether they're in the Engage app for Teams and interactive emails in Outlook, or if you've embedded it into your SharePoint sites or using Viva Connections. And just as Spencer showed earlier, I just want to, show this again. The image on the left is how you can, there's a post in Engage in Teams, and I could hit play and I could watch that video from within Teams. The notification in Teams would look almost the same as well. And again, I could just watch the video. On the right is an interactive Outlook email. I could just hit play again. I could watch that video. So for those of you communicators who work furiously behind the scenes, getting leaders to create videos and wanting to get it in front of as many people as possible so that you get the reactions and the engagement that means they'll go and do it again with you, by meeting people where they're at with the long tail of both our immediate notifications and then emails as well, we're going to get that content in front of as many of your employees as possible to reward that hard work that you did working with your leaders. And of course, with Teams and Engage, they go well together. I think a lot of people on the call, some familiar names, have had these discussions over the years. Teams channel in particular, chat is one-on-one, but a Teams channel, once you get beyond 30, 40, 50 people in a Teams channel, it can be hard to catch up. It can be hard to keep up of what's going on in it. And if someone asks a question, you're not always able to go back and find that question, and it can get lost in the feed. Because Teams is designed for smaller scale, sort of real-time conversations around what you're working on, your project teams, your departmental teams. Whereas Engage has always been designed for scaled conversations. It's an open tool. Everyone is in it by default. So it's designed for scaled conversations that could involve most of the organization. If that leader post really drives a great deal of conversation, you could involve a significant number of people. And it is for sharing knowledge and connecting, as we showed the related questions, for example, in a community, saving those questions so they can actually be served up and your experts don't have to answer the same ones over and over again. Things like that don't happen in Teams. But what's really cool is how we're bringing these closer together. Here's our first experience. This is on the mobile app. This is rolling out right now. But you can see that we just have our activity feed, our chat, and then communities in our Teams mobile app. And what's great is if you look at even the coloring and the design, it's far more like Teams. So the Engage experience in Teams looks like it fits in Teams. And we're looking through the feed here, everything from not as much blue and a lot more purple through to the functionality. I can go in, as well as the home feed, I can see my communities. So I'm going through, we're looking at those posts that we were showing you how to make earlier. Whether it's images, they pop, they look great, much better than the first iteration of the Engage experience in Teams. And of course, when we're using mobile, we get things like our nice image picker from our iOS or Android apps as well. So we're going to add some images here. I think it looks good, this post, so we're going to go make this post. And it should be at the top there. When we scroll back up, there it is. And doing this all from a Teams app. And as an end user, I don't even know that we're using an app called Engage here. Like, we can keep it simple. I can go and see my leadership corner and see all my leader activity if we have Viva CNC or Viva Suite licenses. And I can even tap on answers at the top, which will enable me to see those Q&A posts in the community, like I shared with you before. So I can go in and I can ask a question, then I can wait until I get a notification for me to pop back in. So this is rolling out right now, which gives, it's a mobile experience first, but gives you a great initial experience for especially your frontline employees, if you have those, for engaging in communities, leadership corner, and being able to ask questions all within Teams. But what we're really excited about is where we're headed. And I'm going to let our video talk for itself here, I hope. There we go. Let me just start this again. It's a trouble slide this morning too. We're pretty excited by this stuff. Bringing storyline into Teams first. How cool is it to get a notification that is just a storyline post? Here is one from one of our leadership who does this awesome 5-minute short update once a week, and we can just consume it from within our Teams notification. But also what we're adding is the storyline tab. So when I'm having a one-on-one chat, if I'm talking to someone that I haven't worked with, maybe they're new, they haven't worked with me, we can go and look at each other's storyline from right within that Teams chat. And if we're storyline users, learn a bit about each other. What are we working on? What our kids are called? Where we've been on vacation? All those things that help round us out as human beings that storyline enables us to use. But as well as storyline coming into Teams, we were able to share in our roadmap webinar a few weeks ago that we're also bringing communities natively into Teams. So here you'll see the new design for Teams. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's equal weight given to chat and channels and communities, and you are able to favorite them in any order that you would like to choose. So in this example here on the left-hand side, we have a chat, then we have a team or a channel from a team, and then we have 2 communities. And these are the places that I visit most often, and so I want them front and center. And by having the community, you'll see it's completely part of Teams. We're not going to an Engage app. If you look at the left-hand side there, there's no Engage app sitting there. And I can go, whether it's desktop, as I showed you, or within mobile, I can go in and I can look at my communities. And again, from an end user perspective, I'm just in Teams. Of course, we will have the Viva Engage apps, the mobile apps, the web app, if your users would like to use these as well. But from an initial experience, simplified as well, it means you don't have to explain so much to them as a way to onboarding. And of course, this is what I hope, and I think a lot of everyone on this call will think, that maybe it will be time, once these are available, that we can retire the which tool when conversation. Fingers crossed. And now next, I will pass over back to Spencer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is a great topic, and always one that's interesting to chat about. And it's a good segue into the next sort of beyond the basic concept that we wanted to put in front of this group today, which are network effects. Network effects are definitely something that, maybe we've all heard in the consumer space and other contexts, but I think it's really important to re-up this concept as we look at Engage as an org-wide comms tool, and you're looking at adoption strategies, training strategies in your organization. And to start and level set, given that network effects can really mean a lot of different things, we should bring it back to maybe the core definition. And I found this quotation from Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, around network effects. And the parts are mine, but I really do think this calls out why this is such an important aspect to consider in an adoption strategy for Engage or an org-wide comms product, because it's all about generating positive feedback loops. And then there's a bit there that says, super linear growth and value creation, which I think we can turn into something a little more plain language to say, if you can find ways to make Engage almost self-sustaining because it's just creating so much value, you're going to see more value created. And so as people continue to use Engage for different org-wide comms scenarios and jobs, it does tend to have a compounding effect in organizations. And we've seen this in many different cases in different contexts. And that's why the guidance that we were thinking about here is for really everybody to think strategically about how you want to grow awareness of Engage with critical scenarios, users, and content. We've touched a little bit about on some of those scenarios or some of those even content and user aspects so far. But as we move into more of the strategy and coaching aspect of this presentation, this is a really good segue and moment to pause and think. And so one of the best ways to start or inspire adoption is to consider what we're calling sticky scenarios. And when we say sticky scenarios, we're looking for elements of your business that are maybe already there or already present and are a great fit for some of the superpowers of Viva Engage. But also, there are those types of activities in our organizations that happen really well anywhere, but are definitely supercharged by some of the other areas that Engage is so good at. Bringing people together, asynchronous dialogue, reach of all sorts of different corners of an organization. And that's why we kind of did this inventory here on this slide. Really, one of the best places to start, if you're not considering this already, is to really lean into team communication and celebration. We actually do this in our own team. We have a private community. Our divisional leaders, our CVPs, all of the managers and other types of folks in the organization use this community to celebrate achievements, to give people org-wide news, and to really create a place for interaction that is, again, asynchronous and distributed, and a nice complement to all the other rhythms that we have or norms that we have in our culture. Also, consider where you want to go with broad appeal forums. I mean, one of the best examples from a customer recently was launching a new product or service. There was a new product coming out in this customer. They knew they were going to hear about it from their customers, from frontline employees, from leaders, from other folks in the corporate offices. And so Engage is a great place to have those discussions. Why not spin up a community? Why not start a campaign? Find a way to get that feedback and those dialogues happening, because they're going to happen anyway. And Engage is a great place to kind of consolidate a lot of that discussion for use in the future, but also so that people can keep up at a pace that makes sense for them. Employee resource groups, another really good sticky scenario, because these organizations or these groups in your organization are usually already bringing people together for a defined purpose. And this is a great way to increase the impact of some of those activities. So maybe there's an event today for a certain ERG. Well, if you back it up with an Engage post, now that post is going to live on for weeks or months and allow people to find more great stuff that's happening in their organization and maybe sign up for the next event. These are really easy things because they're already happening, as we said. Maybe they're using different tools, but they really make sense to map or migrate to Engage as a way to create those feedback loops and those network effects. And finally, we've touched on this a little bit here. I think everybody is quite aware of the importance of getting leaders to buy into Engage, but sometimes it's hard to figure out where to start. And on the right-hand side of this slide, we have an example from one of our leaders at Microsoft. And what they do is they send out an email every Friday. It's a quick update. It's an interview with somebody in the organization that's doing some interesting work. And people look forward to it. It's almost like a blog that you can subscribe to, or that people are subscribed to through different communications options that we have in Engage. And again, that's information that executives want to get out anyway. It might be happening in a different way, but it's a really good sticky scenario in terms of bringing in some of the benefits of Engage to your org-wide comms strategy and approach, ultimately driving adoption. So let's talk about a little bit about how to make this happen. One of the things that we thought we could boil this down to is the scenario, the content, and the audience. So let's take that example of the executive communication. Well, you know what? They just came back from a customer event. They want to share their perspectives with everybody who wasn't there and also have a benefit and kind of live on into the future. Okay, that sounds good. We know the scenario. The content, well, we know we want to summarize some findings. As James mentioned, rich media is always a good idea for engagement. So let's include a few pictures. And maybe if we're lucky, we could also encourage people to do a quick video, maybe off their phone, just chatting through some of what they saw, drop it into the post. Now we've got text and video and images. That's a fantastic way to start. And then audience. Now we know audiences are a defined element inside of Engage, but if we just take that generally, we say, okay, who needs to actually see this? Should we post this in a community where everybody in their organization is a member? Should we use an announcement on their storyline to get a similar effect? Or should we just post this in a few different places across the network to sort of make sure we're hitting all the right groups? If you think through all of these elements, as you start to zoom out, you realize that if all of these other folks are doing the same thing, that's where you get the compounding effect of the network. You start to see content, scenarios, and audiences all interleave or overlap using places like the home feed for distribution and engagement. And it allows you to create those feedback loops, that nonlinear growth that Reid Hoffman was talking about earlier. And I have to say, my favorite part about all of this is it's not just theoretical. When you look at advanced analytics, you can actually measure this stuff. You can see who's sharing the most amount of posts, which posts are generating the most engagement, what channels, is it Outlook, is it Teams, is it core clients that are creating a lot of the metrics or the reactions and the comment volume, and where should you go from there? Because as you start to measure, as you start to understand the way that messages in your network behaves, you get all of that extra data and insight to make everything just a little bit better. So as you can tell, it's a very important thing. It's the kind of aspect that you're never really done, but it is a really good way to frame adoption strategy from the perspective of driving network effects in your organization. Awesome. I'm going to turn it back over to James. We're going to talk a little bit about launch plans, but hopefully this was helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Spencer. Now, as Spencer said, we're going to talk about launch plans. We've got our building blocks. We know what we're going to put into some of our training. We know between scenario, content, audience, what we're trying to build now. And there are three things we think you most need to launch Viva Engage. The first is you need a clear purpose. The second is a plan. And the third is having the right people in the room when you're making those plans as well. What do we mean by purpose? We mean that it's best to launch Viva Engage for some really clear reasons rather than just launching it for the sake of having Viva Engage. So rather than just saying we want to have two-way conversation, we want to actually tie those to outcomes, business goals, and things that, so when you go back to leaders and show them data in the end, you can show that your work is impacting the organizational's goals. Where can we find some of those purpose questions? We could look at our company's values and then see how will Viva Engage help enact those company values. We can look at our top 5 business priorities and a number of other areas as well. But definitely having a clear purpose is very, very powerful. You could even think to specific scenarios, launch of a new product, new hire onboarding, a leadership listening campaign. We run our Glint engagement surveys once a year, but we really want to do more real-time listening and getting feedback on specific questions. Engage enables you to do that if you get the right content, and then you have the analytics to help drive that as well. In addition to the purpose, we recommend a great team to help you launch. And I should say, all of this can be relaunch or reinvigorate. You don't have to have one shot. You can go again. The first is an executive sponsor. We always say that, but an executive sponsor is almost even more important with Engage than maybe some other tools. And that's because you need an executive who will actually be on Engage, using Engage, and by that activity, they are showing everyone else it is okay. They are modeling what you as an organization hopes to see in your Viva Engage network, from their posting, from their audience announcements, all those kind of things, involvement in communities, multiple ways that they can do this. But the executive and an active executive is always really important. Of course, you need your communications team. It used to be that IT ran Engage in the past, but these days it tends to be communications. And what that means is comms and the bottom row there, your Viva Engage admin or product owner in IT, you need a really strong relationship between comms and IT, because comms needs to know how to talk to IT needs to know how to talk to comms, so you can take all that purpose-driven plan that you've prepared and actually have that enacted through the deployment of Engage. And of course, you'll need IT's help. You can go watch our masterclass from a few weeks back on admin and governance and things like that, which will help give you some insight here. And of course, always great to bring along your community admins with you. So we have the purpose, we have the people. This is an example 60-day plan. We've seen everything from 30 days through to 365 days, but some of the things are the same. Planning your strategy, your initial use cases, configure and set up, and then kicking off really with a leadership announcement from that executive as well. And then if you have additional licenses, you can build upon the community experience with Ask Me Anythings, running a campaign. All these things drive really strong initial engagement because you're showing what Engage does, and again, meeting business goals. And just as a sample checklist, I won't go through this, but it will be in the slides for you. What are some of the things that you could plan on doing in those first 60 days in this example? And how well do you stack up once you've got through them? Now, you might remember at the beginning, I mentioned that we've also asked some of our partners what they recommend. Silicon Reef here recommend a phased approach to rollout. As I said, there's not one size that fits all for customers. So for Silicon Reef, they will help you go through a pilot group and then add more people over time. They might not recommend you use every capability all at once, but have a phased approach. And what they've found is this is valuable because it helps you test test and see how people interact and engage with each other. You can refine your governance. We're going to talk about moderation later, so this applies very strongly here, and ease employees into that adoption so it's not a big bang launch. So they do a more iterative approach of an initial discovery and planning, a launch, and then future phases as well to be determined. And as I get to the last part of this section, I just want to share this lovely idea from a customer who has recently moved from workplace and is going to do a big kickoff in a few months. They're going to have a Viva Engage day, and they're going to bring together in person their communicators, their EAs, their community admins. They're going to have posters. Apparently someone's going to bake some Engage cookies, which I really hope we get a picture of that we can share to you all. And they're going to have a morning with a kickoff with that executive sponsor. The SVP of comms is going to be telling her team why it's so important to use Engage and what they're using it for. There's that modeling, and she is going to be active on it as well. Full demo showcase. They're going to bring in another customer to talk about how they use Viva Engage, and then a bunch of training workshops in the afternoon. But all of these help you think through whether you want to launch Engage from scratch or whether you're relaunching or reinvigorating, just some of the things to consider. And now I'm going to hand back to Evelyn to talk about Champions Networks.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So coming fresh off of that launch plan, I want to see, maybe show of thumbs up, how many of you feel that scaling adoption for new technology is challenging, that employees are resistant to change? Got some thumbs up, lots of thumbs up. So clearly you're not alone. This is something we see across organizations, and what's become increasingly clear over time is the power of peer-to-peer support in change management. So how do we make this happen? Oh, enter the Champions Network. This is a group of employees from different business areas who will come together to supercharge your organization's adoption journey. I see this as an extension of that team that James was referring to earlier. And before we dive deeper in here, quick thank you to our partners over at Change Champions Consulting for their expertise in this space. Now let's talk a little bit about what makes a great champion. So our very own Caruana said it best. Essentially, you want to find a team of people who are passionate and available to participate, who are willing to learn and grow, ones who are strong communicators, ones who are likely peer influencers who can naturally encourage that engagement. Now, you might be wondering, well, where do I go to find these people? Now, the best champions are the ones that are already engaging with your tools. You just need to identify them. So here's some ideas of how you might be able to go do that. Perhaps use data, tracking application usage. You can ask leaders for nominations, promote participation through open casting call of sorts. So send out an email, send out via Engage posts. And once you've identified these champions, we have a quick list of some ideas on how you might be able to kickstart that champions network, get those folks engaged. So in that chart, you'll see there a rough idea on how you might get this champions network going, some activities that you might be able to use as well. Now, what exactly can these champions do for you? How can these champions help? You have these champions now. What can you do? You can have them engage with your team. So you can ask them to take insights back to their colleagues, share insights back with you. You can allow them to learn and grow with you. So they can be the ones to test out new tools, help guide their colleagues through change management as well. See them as early adopters for this space, right? So how can they come back to you with this real world feedback? They're coming from all different areas of different departments, different business areas. So how can they take that new tech practice and come back with feedback specific to their areas? And lastly, and I kind of see this as like success here, is really just helping you scale. Like we saw earlier, James mentioned that team. I think in chat someone mentioned too that Eloise mentioned they're 3/4 of the roles of that team, right? So how can we make it so that this team, this launch team, this team trying to make this change management successful scales better? And this Champions Network is a great way of doing so. They can be the ones to create new learning opportunities for others. They can be the ones to make change more organic by connecting people as well. And lastly here, we want to talk about making that champions network a bit more sustainable. So to really help make this network kind of just a self-sustaining loop of sorts, we highly recommend creating an engaged community where these champions can support each other, they can share knowledge, they can share best practices, they can support each other in learning and troubleshooting, they can collaborate on ideas and inspire innovation from one another. And a quick tip here, you can brand your champions. A great way of doing this would be with Engage campaign sashes, for example. A great way to add a little pizzazz as they engage across the Engage network, regardless of what communities they're coming in and out of. They'll be able to have that indicator of sorts to highlight and promote themselves as that champion. All right. And now that you've built, and we've talked about building that champions network, talked about how to make it more self-sustaining, tracking impact is incredibly key here. You want to make sure that you're able to showcase the value of this champions program, understand the value of it. And this can be done in a handful of ways. You can gather feedback through surveys. You can track participation through meetings and discussions. You can listen to and from the champions themselves for success stories. And by tracking these insights, not only do you get a better idea of the ROI on this champions program, but more importantly, you can continually improve the program to ensure that long-term success. Let's just share a quick recap here of that champions network. And for all of those of you who have used a champions network or something similar before, I would love to hear about your experience. I would love if you could drop a comment into the chat. With that, I'll pass it back off to James.
Thanks, Evelyn. Okay, so we've done our fundamentals. We've done our 200 level. How many of you are ready to engage like a pro? How many of you have used Engage for a long time? Maybe we need some refreshers as well. I always need refreshers myself even. There's so much here. So we're going to engage like a pro here. And we're going to kick off. I'm going to hand back to Spencer to take you through moderation.
Awesome. And thank you so much, James. And really with moderation, it's one of those ones where we say engage like a pro, but it's relevant to everybody no matter where you are in your journey. I really want to make sure that what we're kind of putting forth here is important for groups that are turning on Engage for the first time, but also maybe you've run a network for a while and you really could use a refresher or a way to liven up things and really refocus where you're at. So as we look at moderation and we kind of take us through this more engage like a pro section, I really want to start with these 4 elements. These are kind of characteristics or items that you might want to consider as we're going through some of these concepts, because really the most important thing with moderation is that it supports the purpose of what you're trying to do with Engage. So you think about what we talked about earlier in the presentation. Consider how you plan to use Engage as a place for org-wide comms, for connection, to have everybody sort of be in one place together, all consuming and kind of interacting with each other. Well, if that's the purpose that you're going for, we want to make sure your moderation approach enables that vision. The next 2 points, amplify the good and prepare for crises, they're linked because moderation is not just about finding bad things and stopping them in their tracks. It's also about making sure that the network is shaped in a way where people feel like it's a relevant, exciting, worthwhile place to spend time and do communication. And there's also kind of procedures, controls, elements in place to make sure that if things are going wrong, we can handle it. And really the final item here is to learn from your users. As you kind of go through having a network in your organization, your users will tell you either explicitly or implicitly how things are going. And you can use that signal to calibrate how you've approached moderation all the way through. As we go into this section, I want to also share some of our research and data. We've done a large study with customers all around the world, and we asked them 2 very simple questions. We wanted to get a sense on how the network health was in their organization. We wanted to know, first of all, how are your communities doing, and how's your overall Engage implementation doing? And as you can see from these bar charts here, basically everyone or most of the people that responded said that things were going good to excellent in terms of moderation capabilities or digital safety. And we took that as a really positive thing because it does signal that while we always need to be prepared for the not so good, by and large, Engage is a positive, constructive place for people to spend time. And it does bear out in all the great work that people are doing with this product worldwide. So it's a really important kind of item to hit on as we're kind of getting into some of those controls. But by and large, it's a positive place. So as we go through all of this, I think the first place to start is to really understand who can do what from a moderation perspective. There's a lot of detail on this in the first masterclass. You can see the link on this slide, or you can always look it up. But what we want to make sure that everybody is kind of clear on is the network administrator, corporate communicator, and community administrator role. These roles have the bulk of the moderation capabilities, and generally speaking, people with these roles do most of the day-to-day moderating in their organization. There's lots of capabilities available at the higher levels of admin as well, but really it's about making sure that you've tooled and you've equipped these people with all the right information and capabilities. And a quick refresher here, this is the full capability set that we have available from a moderation point of view today. This is one of those slides you may want to screenshot for later or share with your team, because really you need to think about the way that the layers fit. You have capabilities to moderate everything and engage in one go. You have moderation capabilities at the community level, and you have moderation capabilities at the conversation level, and as well as a few things also at the user level. So really what you need to think about here is how is everything going to fit together? Where do we as a team want to start? Do we want to start broad with the across engage column, or do we want to start with more of a conversation by conversation approach? There's pluses and minuses to both, but ultimately this will be informed by the way that you see the network working and the overall approach and vision that you have. To carry on from that, I thought I would share just some best practices to moderate at scale. These are informed from our conversations, from information and data and evidence that we've seen all around the world. And really, if you start with this place, you've got a great foundation to go elsewhere. The first item here is to mute communities. When you mute a community, you prevent its posts from showing up in the home feed or the email digest for anyone who's not a member. This is a really important capability in the event that you have communities where you don't mind if people want to interact in that space, but you don't necessarily want the content to send out all across the network. Maybe you have some social communities or you have some niche topics that you're totally fine. People can have those discourses on Engage, but muting is a great way to sort of, again, make sure that the network feels relevant and exciting and not necessarily a distraction. I really recommend that folks consider using Report a Conversation. This is an item that you can turn on in the admin center. And when you turn it on, it's the best way for users to proactively tell you when they have a concern about some content. Users can report the conversation directly to an admin, and then you can review and take action. We also encourage people to plan to use view-only mode. View-only mode is a capability that came out in July and August of last year, and it is an ability to remove the creation, edit, or reaction rights of any user in the product. So they can still consume their business-critical communications, they can still visit, engage, and browse all of the information that's really important to them, but they don't have that ability to write a comment or do other sorts of creation capabilities. And we say plan to use it because you never know when you're going to be in a situation where this is the right outcome. Perhaps you're talking with your internal partners and you've decided that this is the way that we're going to sort of enforce an outcome that's been decided. And it's always good to sort of run through that first and really understand how the feature works. One thing you can do, we recommend people, is get a room with some colleagues, put each other on view only mode, refresh the page, see what that's like, take each other off view only mode, get a sense of how that's all going to work. But it's a really important capability to at least sound out and understand how it's all going to work in the event that you need to use it. And then finally, closed conversations. Closed conversations is available to the creator of a message, the community administrator, the corporate communicator, the network administrator, and higher levels of admin, depending on the context. When you close a conversation, you prevent anybody from writing a new comment. And this is a great thing to say. Maybe the conversation's gotten a little off course, or maybe there's multiple threads about the same conversation. And we find that as moderators, it really does help to say, hey, everyone, thanks so much for your input. We've decided to close this conversation for reasons, A, B, and C. If you want to have this discussion, here's what you can do. Thank you. And that is a really reasonable way above board to just direct the discussion in a way that you want it to go. And so finally, I want to leave everybody with two little bits of information or tools that you can take back to your team. These are definitely, screenshot slides or things you want to watch for in the recording, but really design a moderation approach that makes sense for your organization. Start with the 4 questions on this slide and really think about who can we get in the room to help us answer these questions and really build a shared vision. So first of all, how does your org expect employees to behave and interact? This might be how they are expected to behave and interact in any context, whether it's offline or online, and we can bring that experience to Viva Engage. Next, how could your Engage purpose inform the actions you take? So if you go back to what we were saying earlier, if Engage is going to be a place where people can interact with their leaders, voice their insights or their opinions on company strategy, and really meet people from all different parts of the business. If we say that's the purpose and we know how we expect people to behave, all of a sudden the rest of the moderation approach doesn't seem so daunting. The third item here is how can moderation enable participation and the very important term here, psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is not necessarily one of those things that you can just make happen overnight, but it is important in the sense of, we want people to feel like their contributions will be valued. We want them to know that they're safe here and that they can really speak up or share their insights wherever they feel it's right. And so by having the right controls in place, you do create the conditions in and amongst all the other things your organization is doing to have that level of input from people. And then finally, what experiences can you take from elsewhere and apply to Engage? There's been some great examples in the customers I've spoken to recently where they have, situations that have happened in other contexts or years ago, and they're able to say, you know what, if that was to happen on Engage, this is what we would want to do. Or I bet you if we had this happen in Engage, we would have responded differently. And this is the kind of stuff that, again, it's important to sort of make it real, make it feel kind of lively to everybody around the room, because again, then the moderation approach doesn't seem so daunting. So finally, I'll leave you folks with a checklist. This is really 4 steps that you can take, maybe starting this week, to get moderation in gear for your network. And definitely, again, screenshot this slide or leave me a comment if you have thoughts. But the first thing is, why not run a workshop and determine some of the moderation approach items we were just talking about? Get in the room with everybody that needs to be there. Maybe it's a people or an HR department. Maybe there are folks from a legal or employee relations group, frontline managers, site leads, whoever really could be a good voice at the table to make sure that you're designing something that makes sense for your organization. Then consider enabling capabilities in priority. Maybe you want to start with elements like reported conversation, but you want to maybe hold off on some of the other like mute community options that we talked about. You decide how it all is going to map, but once you have a plan, it becomes a lot easier to work the plan. And the third one, this one actually came to my mind as we were talking to different people and really were thinking about how a lot of media relations and external communications teams run simulations to practice for when things go wrong. Well, there's no reason why you couldn't do that with Engage. Why don't you simulate a crisis or simulate an issue that's likely to happen in the business? See how you might respond with features and different people around the room. And when you do that, again, it becomes a lot less scary in the event you have to do it. And you're able to show any sort of stakeholders or leadership group that we've thought about it, we ran something to ground, and we know exactly what we would do if that would happen. Finally, have some check-ins with people. It can be online through Engage. It can be in, a town hall forum, something where you're able to say, what do people think? How's it going? Are people getting value out of this? Is there anything we could do differently or anything you've seen elsewhere that could maybe inspire how we might want to moderate ourselves? And doing this kind of routine effectiveness evaluation is just a great way to keep things fresh, keep things feeling relevant. So I hope this was helpful, everyone. Really enjoyed kind of going through some of these moderation capabilities. There's plenty of stuff out there that we've done this year on this stuff, and happy to take questions in the Q&A. Take it away, James. Thanks so much.
Great stuff, Spencer, especially the simulate issues and crises. I've never thought about that before until I saw Spencer when he prepared this slide. I think it's a fantastic idea. Moving on to getting leaders on Engage. It's a question that we hear from customers. We know our partners work hard on this, and we know all of you work hard on this. How do we get our leaders on Engage? And as I actually given some of the names that I've seen in the chat here today, I would encourage you all to share just one tip that you have used to get a leader to post on Engage while I go through some of the options that we have pulled together for this session. The first way we think about it is what data could we use to convince leaders to show them that them being on Engage is going to impact something to do with the business? The first of these, and you may have seen this before, is our engagement metric. This actually is included for every network in those Viva CNC and Viva Suite licenses. But what we noticed, excuse me, is that employee retention is higher for employees who use Engage in their first 90 days in the job. Now, we're not saying that Engage is causing this, but it's definitely facilitating it. Because what this really makes a lot of sense, that where you give people a place to be part of something more than, as we talked about in that which tool when section, if we're part of something more than those closed teams, those closed chats, those closed channels, where those people that we work with on an everyday basis, and we give them a way to contribute and take part in the wider culture of the organization, both on a social side, whether it's a dogs community or a coffee lovers community, or whether it's actually around strategy, or if one of those change management communities that Evelyn was talking about, or become a champion, they feel like they're actually part of something more. They belong to more than our everyday work, and that's important. And by Engage giving them a space to actually contribute to this, we see that organizations see around a 33% increase in those employees who are retained after their first 90 days, which is a very powerful metric given how much it costs to recruit, hire, and train new employees. In addition, the audience and sentiment analysis for leaders is also another really powerful tool that you can put in front of leaders to help them see the value. And of course, we're not just talking about the value of Engage, we're talking about the value of your work in making Engage successful, whether you're in communications or IT or another department as well. So while as organizations, we might put out an employee engagement survey once a year, maybe once every 6 months, we might do some pulse surveys as well. What the audience analytics, especially the sentiment and the theming, this is near real time listening data for leaders. So we're serving up to you so you can take it to leaders, what people are thinking, what people are feeling, what's top of mind, where those threads are happening, and then you're able to quantify the impact of those, and also enabling leaders to both see the positive news that they may have missed. We're going to get that put in front of them as well, but also maybe get on top of conversations where the impact of a leader joining in those conversations will actually create something new and great for your organization. Well, actually, one large customer who, a leader at the customer, saw that their reach, and so when we're talking about reach, you think all the way back to the fundamentals. We've built upon all these as we've gone through the masterclass today. So reach meaning our notifications are going out, the email digests are going out, we're using announcements as content, as thoughtful as some of the sticky scenarios that Spencer shared earlier. We saw a leader saw their reach increase 10 times after they've been identified as a leader and of course given an audience. So there's a huge impact in having those additional CNC or Viva Suite licenses for those leaders in particular. But of course, sometimes we hear, and I'm sure you've always heard, I'm too busy for this. I don't have time for this. This is too much for me to do. And this is where a great stat from our partner, Swoop Analytics, they created this a number of years ago, and it's really powerful. But how many leaders can counter the argument where all we're asking you to do is make one post, give 2 replies, and give 3 reactions once a week? It's going to take you about 10 minutes. Do you think we could find that together? I can sit down and do it with you. And it's quite a good pushback to the busy leader question. And so we thought about, well, what happens when you get that time with executives? I sat there, I've been given 15 minutes with each of a C-suite and wondered, what can I do in 15 minutes to help convince them to at least consider making a post on Engage? In 15 minutes, I always found the key question was, what keeps you up at night? What's top of mind? And leaders do tend to like to talk about these things, which is great because you're listening to them. You're being curious to them. You want to align it to their specific strategies, problems, successes. We find that leaders tend to use their phone or a tablet to access Engage. So make sure you have that handy in front of you so you can show them how to use it very, very quickly, maybe not even as the length of demo that I gave earlier on in this session, and even have a post ready for them, ready to make, show them how to do it. And of course, if you have Microsoft 365 Copilot, you can, or Engage Copilot, you can get support with writing, you can get support with ideas as well. If we get 30 minutes, it's better. We've got a bit more time. We can actually take a breath at least once during this session. Let's ask instead, what would you, so we're building upon, so all the things you did in 15 minutes, plus another set of ideas. What would you like to ask employees? What would you like to learn from your employees? Not every leader is going to respond to that, but many, many do. Show them examples of other leaders, or I put leaders in quotes, meaning the more unofficial, like thought leaders, or just real connectors in your network, about the type of posts they make, what gets them lots of reactions, what gets them lots of replies, and see how they feel about that. Or even leaders from other customers, and we have lots of great customer stories that are linked to in our blogs, for example. Then maybe explain the 1, 2, 3 rule. And I know that a number of people, myself included, have sat down with a leader and we already have the one post drafted that we're going to write for them probably and post on their behalf of, but we want them to see and join us in doing it. We already have the 2 posts that we want them to reply to. And maybe we've even got a draft of what they're going to reply, and the 3 posts that we want them to react to, honestly, even down to telling them which reaction that we want them to add. But it's just to get them comfortable, and then show them their audience analytics if you have access to that, maybe on the next session, to show the impact of the first post. And of course, if you have 60 minutes, that's much better. You can actually get comfortable. You can take your time. You can do a longer demo, like a full show and tell. You can bring together more highlights from across your network or other stories if you're just getting deployed. And then maybe there is time to sit down and either craft with your leader, your executive, or even record them, do a top 5 top of mind. In an hour, you could probably script and deploy that, script and record that rough and ready if your leader is comfortable doing that, and actually go and make that post with them. I always made my goal is to have them have actually done something during the 15 minutes, the 30 minutes, the 60 minutes, whatever I've had, so that I could come back and show them some data afterwards. And if you like this kind of approach, our partner, who's actually in Australia designing collaboration, actually have what I really appreciate, which is a deck of cards with scenarios that you can actually pull out and put in front of leaders. They can even pull out those cards themselves, shuffle a deck, say, pull one out, leader. If you're game, we're going to go and do what's on the card. And the scenarios are really compelling for them to use Engage. And of course, if you're really stuck, that's where Copilot comes in. This is a prompt that I wrote myself. Our CEO has a growth strategy, but we have a dearth of new products, and it's really top of mind because it's impacting sales. Can you suggest 5 types of posts we could make on her behalf to drive 2-way engagement on those topics? And Copilot gave me these actual responses, which I thought were really, really useful. So don't forget, Copilot is super powerful in helping you be your brainstorm assistant of what should be top of mind when you're sitting down and talking with those leaders, even down to saying how long you have with those leaders. But hopefully this was some useful tips and tricks for when you next sit down with that executive. And now I'm going to hand back over to Evelyn.
Thank you. Thank you. So another fantastic, if not my personal favorite use case for Engage. It's one that teams consistently tell me makes their lives significantly easier, especially with the various tools that we have to encourage knowledge sharing and whatnot in Engage itself. And I hinted at this earlier with the peer-to-peer learning of champions, focusing on change management. And perhaps this is the one thing that's keeping your leadership up at night. So we're going to walk through 2 ways of thinking about this. First of all is thank you to our longtime partners at WM Reply for this framework. This is a proven framework for thinking about change management. It's called the ADKAR model, and it outlines the various steps an individual goes through when thinking about adopting a new technology. So we've got awareness, understanding that a change is happening, desire, wanting to use that change. The knowledge piece comes in terms of knowing how to use that tool, and then building confidence, building that ability through applying it to daily work. And then you get to this the step of success where it's reinforcement. It becomes a habit. It's something the user is able to successfully and consistently use, and it becomes part of that long-term success for the individual themselves. And here is a quick real-world example from a multinational company's ADKAR plan. So really thinking about on the flip side, we just took a look at how an individual steps through ADKAR. On the flip side, how can you and your team really think about how you might refine your own change management plans to ensure that each of those steps you can reduce the friction towards for the individual themselves. And for anyone who has used AdCar, I'm quite curious to hear about your experience. So would love to hear more about how, if you've heard of AdCar and how you've used it in the chat. We're going to shift perspective a little bit towards another frame here. Before I jump into that, quick thumbs up or poll of sorts, show of hands, show of thumbs up. How many of you have had to answer the same question over and over again when rolling out a new tool? And follow-up question to that, how many of you are currently experiencing this with the rollout of M365 Copilot? Yep. Looks like that's a great example for us to jump into. So since Copilot adoption is top of mind for many of us, it sounds like, we're going to deep dive into this specific use case for this next framework, really thinking about how Engage community specifically can streamline and accelerate your adoption of Copilot within your organization. Now, we can see here, there's a bit of a flywheel going here. And I wanted to talk through how exactly the Copilot adoption community can help employees through these key phases of change, how you can foster this sort of peer-driven learning culture in a Copilot adoption community. And the way in which this goes is sort of, you start at, inspire. You've got your leaders and early adopters, perhaps from your champions network, that you can ask to share real world success stories to build that excitement, to get people to then start to explore, to get those employees to experiment, ask questions, discuss how that change impacts at work, or if they're trying out a new tool, giving those a new try, and essentially building towards that collective knowledge then. So whether that be if people have questions about the change, or as they're learning new things about Copilot, for example, here, sharing new prompts that they've tried, building overall that collective knowledge across the organization there in that community itself that can be not only indexed by M365 Copilot, that's coming soon, Engage content there, but also within Engage Search, being able to find that knowledge. And lastly, making sure that we celebrate all the contributions to the community itself, to that knowledge base. And that's going to just further inspire people to share their stories. And as you can see, the flywheel circles back around and keeps going. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how exactly you can do this today. So we have this Copilot adoption community template available today. All you need at the current moment is one M365 Copilot license, and you'll have access to this. Perhaps for those of you who have Copilot adoption communities already, if you could let us know in chat how you're using it, any feedback you might have, any tips or tricks or things like that, would love to hear about it in chat. But the key components of this community that are really helping with that flywheel I mentioned earlier are really the conversation starters that encourage people to share about their Copilot learnings, encourage people to share about the prompts that they use, the aha moments that they've had with Copilot. There's also things like suggested content, which currently actually sees 30% higher engagement than our organic content. And this is seeded content ideas for you to quickly go in, one click to share back to the community, but really building up the content, the knowledge in the community itself. We also have things like, and this is all available to all Engage licenses, the FAQ with Intelligent Importer, similar questions we turned on, I think 100% 2 weeks ago. So being able to search for questions and find answers from across the entirety of Engage, not only that community itself. So there's quite a lot here packed into this one community, very much supercharged with everything we feel you might need to get that flywheel going. All right, and with that, I will pass it back to James, I believe, to finish us off.
Excellent. Thank you, Evelyn. Just take control again. Hey, you may be wondering how we're going to cover live events and data and analytics in the next 4 minutes, but that's because we've created 2 separate sessions on these for you. So in 2 weeks, at the same time, we'll be delivering captivating events with, create captivating events with Viva Engage. It's both AMAs and live events. We're going to have our leadership communications team from Microsoft talk about how we do town halls, so best practices, things, how to coach your leader to deliver a great town hall, and then all the technology and how the capabilities and how you run it from Engage. And then we're going to wrap up the Masterclass series on the 7th of April. That's the 8th of April for all of you on the other side of the time, the day shift east of us, or west of us rather. And that will be a deep dive on data and analytics. But as we get to the last couple of minutes of the session today, we want to bring your attention to a few things again. First of all, again, our brand new modern communications microsite on how comms can be the key business driver of AI transformation. And apologies, I haven't put the link in here. Maybe someone could add that into the chat for us. And a reminder, again, of the communications track at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference in May in Vegas. Again, we still have the discount code, super worth you signing up and coming along. It's an amazing event. For those of you who are not yet members, we have a really active customer community. It sits on our Engage network. And if you have questions, you may get answers from everyone from our CVP to our engineers, product managers, designers. And of course, you'll also get the opportunity of interacting with all our other customers as well. The customer community, just click on that very small form for you to sign up and we'll get you added straight away. Alison just said in the chat, we have an ebook on how we deployed Viva Engage at Microsoft. We actually took some of the content from that for this session. It's super powerful. It's really useful, very practical. I think you'll find it hugely valuable. And also, if you didn't see, in February, we ran a What's New and Next with Viva Engage webinar. So if you want to see everything that's coming up, not just storyline in Teams and communities in Teams, but everything else as well, just go in and watch the recording of that session. And finally, where else can you learn more? The Viva Engage blog, all the things that we took on notifications and email digests and the home feed. There are blogs on each of those in our Viva Engage blog. So I encourage you to go look at it and everything else we have there. Of course, our adoption site. And we love our customer community so much. We put it twice because we'd really like you to come and join us and join in the fun. So all that's left to say is thank you very much for joining. It's a lot to ask for 90 minutes of your time, especially those at your beginning of the day as well. I also want to thank hugely Evelyn and Spencer for joining me and their awesome presentations and their sections in this masterclass. And finally, I would like to thank everyone who has been answering questions in the Q&A. It seemed pretty busy. I didn't have time to jump into it much myself. So that's the Viva Engage team, and also a call out for our MVP, Kevin Crossman, as well. I saw that you were answering lots of those as well. So thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And now I've stopped recording.